Hi everyone, this is Miss Levy, and here we are for the review for the Chapter 2 information about population. So let's start here with some basic terms that we need to know before we really get into the conceptual elements. So we have this term demography. Remember, graphy is the study of, demo is population characteristics, so demography is the study of population characteristics. A demographer is somebody who is a professional in understanding a country or a region's population characteristics. So demographic means population, pertaining to population. Overpopulation, we need to make sure that we understand that overpopulation is not too many people or too many people in an area. That is not overpopulation. Overpopulation is too many people given the amount of resources. So overpopulation is when we have too many people and not enough resources. It's that point at which resources are outpaced by the population. Finally, we know we have density. Density we've learned about in the past. Density is how many, which is the total number of people in an area. So again, we have this idea of demography, the study of human populations, particularly the size, distribution, and characteristics of members of population groups. So this is an area of the Caucasus Mountains area in Central Asia. This is Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Georgia, and part of Russia. You can see how very multicultural this is, but also how the population is distributed. Next, we're talking about these critical issues in population geography. So these are major issues that we are facing and that we're going to need to tackle. We're going to talk about in this chapter and then in chapter 3 as well. 1, more people are alive today than at any other time in human history. 2, the world's population increased at a faster rate during the second half of the 20th century than ever before. Remember, when you talk about 20th century, that's 1900s, because the first centuries would have been the time before 100 AD. So from 0 to 100 AD was the first century. So we are in the 21st century, which is the 2000s. And virtually all population growth today occurs in less developed countries. Those countries that are less developed, that means they're the least wealthy. That means they're least capable of providing for themselves. So 3 major critical issues. Start with key issue 1, which is where is the world's population distributed. We're talking about population concentrations, where we have sparsely populated regions, where we have populated regions, and then population density. Things to know. Where are the 4 largest population clusters? What is an ecumene? Same thing, what is the non-ecumene? On what types of land do most people settle? What types do they avoid? And what are the 3 types of density? And what is the importance of each? Let's start here with our population concentrations. So just some background information about our population concentration. Remember, these are where we see areas of density, areas of clustering in settlement. 2/3 of the world's population are in 4 regions in the world. 2/3 of the world's population live in 4 of the regions in the world. First is East Asia, second is South Asia, third is Europe, and fourth is Southeast Asia. 2/3 of the world's population live within 300 miles of an ocean. 4/5 live within 500 miles. This was initially for export-import purposes. They needed that access to transportation. Whenever they first settled many of the areas, like the colonization, when they first settled North America, South America, Africa, into parts of Asia, into Australia, they settled on the coast. That's where they landed. And really all they wanted, the Europeans, was import-export. So that's where they started their largest cities. So here we have a map that's representing our population distribution in the world. On this map, 1 dot represents 100,000 people. So we can see where we have this massive clustering of people. So we just talked about the largest clustering is here in East Asia. This is because China is the anchor. So we have East Asia. East Asia is the Korean Peninsula with both North and South Korea. It's including Japan as well. Here's Taiwan. Second largest cluster in the world is South Asia, because they have India is there with also over 1 billion people. This also has a Bangladesh, Pakistan in that region as well. Third largest region, population cluster in the world here is Europe. And this is because Europe, while their populations are declining now, they've had much longer time in their civilization, history of their civilization and modern civilization to grow. And the fourth largest cluster in the world is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia. This is here with Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and then Indonesia. Indonesia is the 5th or 6th largest country in the world in terms of population. As we were talking about, you see this clustering along the coasts especially. This is because, again, when the Europeans, when they began their exploration, they really just wanted access to resources. So they sailed across, let's say, to North America. They settled here on the East Coast. This is why our largest cities are on the East Coast, like New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C. That's because that's where they initially settled. Same thing here with Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. That's where they initially settled here in South America. Same here in Africa. This export-import. India is a bit different, same, because you'll also see where there's clustering along rivers as well. Look at this up here in Morocco, clustering here on the coast. So let's talk about East Asia. Again, East Asia is China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. This is where 1/4 of the world's population live here. And this is because China has 1 billion people. So again, that's here in East Asia. You see that people in East Asia are clustered here on the coast, Pacific Ocean, but also here in the interior. This would be where the rivers are, like the Yellow, the Huanghe, the Yangtze, both of the rivers, because they need this access to agriculture. So again, this is East Asia. Next is South Asia. South Asia is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This is bound by the Himalayas and a desert in Pakistan. So you can see here is the population clustered in South Asia. You see them clustered here on the coast because they need this for monsoon. And then up here in the Ganges River plain. And this is because the vast majority of people here are farmers as well. So they need that access to that fertile soil. This is the Himalaya Mountains here. That's what the cutoff is, why you see this where all of a sudden there's no settlement here. So you see Bangladesh, very populated, Sri Lanka, over here and into India. Next one here is Europe. Europe is highly urbanized, so it's completely different from the other 3 clusters in that Europe is mostly, the countries there are more developed countries. So they're in the core, we call this. They're concentrated in cities. So this is highly urbanized. Next is Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, we have Indonesia. That's the largest. Then Philippines, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, and Myanmar. Again, we see this here, Southeast Asia. Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, all here in this peninsula. Then you have down here Indonesia and the Philippines. We also have a population cluster in North America. Let's take a look at where that would be. That would be up here in the northeastern part of North America. That's New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and then southeastern part of Canada. This is where you would have Toronto in Ontario. You would have Montreal in that area, Ottawa in this area as well. So this is the clustering here in North America. The other clustering, large cluster would be here in Western Africa. You see this is Nigeria. This is a clustering here in North Africa. So again, here we have that same map, just a little bit more into a large scale in its presentation. You see this? This is the Nile River. You see that? This is all Sahara Desert. These people are clustered along the Nile River. 97% of the population in Egypt lives along this Nile River. So again, largest cluster is East Asia. You see they're mainly on the coast, and then here in the river valleys, Yangtze and Huanghe River valleys. Korean Peninsula, Japan. Second largest is South Asia. That's India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. You see that majority of people are here on the coast because they need the rains, the monsoons for the farming. And then also up here in the Ganges River Valley. That's because the Ganges River is sacred to them, but also because they need that fertile soil for all the farming. What blocks this here is the Himalayan mountains. Next, third largest cluster again is here in Europe. You can see Europe is very densely populated. It's different from the other ones because majority of the people do live in cities. Fourth largest one is here in Southeast Asia. Again, we have Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam here in the peninsula. Then we have Indonesia and the Philippines. Next, we have where the world's population is distributed. Where people live, we call this the ecumene. So the densely populated regions, this is the ecumene. People tend to live in the lowlands near fertile soil and temperate climates because and near water source, because vast majority of people in the world, they are so reliant on farming and subsistence farming at that for their own survival. The sparsely populated areas we call the non-ecumene, the area of the Earth's surface that can't sustain a population. These are dry lands, so that's deserts, wetlands. This would be areas where you have extreme rainforest, highlands, these would be mountainous areas, and cold lands. So this would be like the Arctic areas. So again, the ecumene is the portion of the Earth's surface occupied by permanent human settlement. It's increased over time because we've had better technology that allows us to settle on land like in Florida that previously would not been able to do. 3/4 of the world's population lives on only 5% of the Earth's surface because so much of it is ocean. Again, here's our ecumene. You can see that this is going to be in areas where you have fertile soil, temperate climate, access to water. Let's talk about the three types of density again. We've talked about this before. We have arithmetic density, the total number of people divided by the total land area. This is difficult because this assumes that people are evenly distributed, doesn't take into consideration clustering. We have this arithmetic density. You can see where the world's population is extremely densely populated. Russia is the largest country in the world in terms of territory. Canada is a very large country. Brazil is a large country. China is a large country. United States is a large country. Australia is large countries. So they're going to have what seems to be less dense populations just because we have more land for that land area. So again, this is representing the density. People cluster. That's why arithmetic density is not the best density. It's not always accurate when you're looking at it. Next is physiological density. This is the number of people per unit of arable land, which is land suitable for agriculture. This tells you, can a country feed itself? High physiological density means that they have a lot of people and not a lot of farmland. That would be like Egypt, Japan, a country like Haiti would also have a high physiological density. Low physiological density tends to mean they have a low population and a lot of farmland. That would be like United States and Canada, Australia. This is where we see physiological density so you see again a very low physiological density. These are high physiological density. This means there's a strain. Obviously this is desert through here, strain on being able to provide for themselves. Here again is Nile River, 97% of the population living on 3% of this land because the rest is desert. Finally, we have the agriculture density, the number of farmers to the number of farmers to farmland. This tells you if they have access to machines. So a high agricultural density means they have a lot of farmers in the society. That means they're less developed because people are participating in, this is subsistence agriculture. You see here, these people are very primitive tools. You see, these are people who have to work these plots of land really with animal power and very primitive tools. And then Thanks, guys.